Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us again after lunch on day 2 of Gentleman's Journal Live, brought to you by Polestar, in fact. And we're very lucky here today to have our keynote for the afternoon with Michael Lohscheller, who is the CEO of Polestar. There's so much which we want to talk about with you. So thanks very much for being here. And we're going to chat for a little bit, and then I'd like to put it out to the crowd for a couple of questions. But thanks, Michael, for being here. You've been at the FT this morning at a similar sort of summit, but we're going to raise the game for that. The FT, a failing, has-been title. Gentleman's Journal, of course, very much on the up. Yeah, Michael's had such an interesting career. You were the CEO of Opel for many years before this, and you've worked in cars for a long, long time. I wonder if we can start with a kind of an overview of the car industry. What's changed most? What single thing do we think has changed most in the many years since you've been working in automation?
Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. I think we picked a good day, huh?
Yeah.
Is that the average London weather? Probably not, right? So, good day, happy to be here. Good question. I mean, lots of things are changing, right? I think it's interesting. You have new companies coming, also new global companies. Obviously, we are also relatively new. We are 8 years old. We look a little older, right? But Polestar is a young company, 8 years old. Swedish brand, located in Gothenburg. And then you have the legacy OEMs, what we call them, like big automotive companies. Sometimes I think they defend the past, and we try to set up the future, but lots of things happening and super interesting industry.
Absolutely. And what was the biggest change from working at a more traditional, perhaps, car maker like Opel to coming over to Polestar? What did you have to change in your outlook and your mindset?
Yeah, many things actually are different. And when I left Opel, I went to Vietnam to run VinFast, also a very young new company. And then I ran Nikola in Phoenix, Arizona, a bit hotter the weather than here, right? Also, new company, startup mentality. And there are many good things in new companies because you have highly motivated people. You want to do new things, try out new things. You are like much faster than anybody else. You take risk and you have like spirit in the company, right? Whereas you work for the big companies, everybody is kind of defending the jobs, the hierarchy, the salaries and everything. So when I came to Polestar, I sensed immediately the same people come for a reason. They are not just there for a job, they are there for a reason. They want to work on new cars, they want to work on zero-emission mobility, they want to work on very specific things. For example, we have a project where we try to produce a car without any emissions. Well, that is difficult. That is difficult, but people are super motivated to do that. At the same time, sometimes you need a little bit of more structure because, I mean, it's not like, okay, let's do everything at the same time.
Right, absolutely. And we're going to talk a lot about how the technology's changed, I imagine. But how have consumer behaviors changed? What do customers want in their cars in 2025 that perhaps they didn't need 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, most actually software infotainment, right? So, I don't know, 20 years ago, when we had test drives at one of the legacy OEMs, we would look at the finish, the fit, and the gaps, and like every engineering effort was around that topic, right? How big is the gap? I mean, really, customers today don't look at it, but they want to know, okay, what's the next OTA? How does this improve my car? What about infotainment? So it's a very different world. It's a very different world.
Yeah. And what about when you're finding customers and when you're talking to them and when eventually you're trying to sell them a car? How do you have to talk to them differently now than perhaps you might have done in the past?
Well, more often, right, digitally, but also like over-the-air updates. I mean, you're in contact with them all the time. Also, that is different. People don't just come, okay, when they have a service problem, right? You are in contact with them all the time.
Absolutely. What do you see in your head as the sort of the one point of difference between all the many new startup brands and electric car makers now that Polestar has set aside from all of the others?
I think what we have is we are super focused on few things, like all our cars have very unique design. We focus on the performance of the car and sustainability. And I think that sets us apart. And we try to work with other people together, right? We have a so-called asset-light business model. That means we don't have our own factories, right? Usually in automotive, you want to have a big empire. Number of factories, number of people, number of... So you would come to an event like this and you say, well, I'm the CEO and I have so many people working for me and so many factories. Well, I have only 2,500 people working for me and I have no factory. Well, that's maybe a good thing, right? Yeah. Because I use the factories from Volvo and from Geely, but I need to work together with them very well so that I get what my customers want, right? So it's very different. I think we are in a world where you have to connect to people and work with people, and not just, it's all my empire.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very different, very different.
And what about the sort of visual DNA of Polestar? There's two beautiful cars outside. They're very distinctive looking. What to you, even as an outsider looking in before, what did you see in Polestar that you loved?
Very much a Scandinavian design, so not like over the top. I wouldn't call it minimalistic, but in the sense pure, at the same time progressive, and then combining all the great things. You want to have a performance car, you want to have sustainable materials, maybe recycled materials, and putting all that together is great fun, because at the end of the day, when you drive a car, you want to enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I say this every time I see anyone from your team. The thing I love most about the Polestar that I've been in is the gold seat belts, which is such a small thing. But why does every seatbelt have to be black or dull grey? They made gold ones, and it felt like you were strapping into something really exciting as opposed to just another car.
Yeah, and little things, and sometimes also bigger things. For example, Polestar was the first brand which put in Google built-in. And you cannot imagine the criticism of the entire industry saying, Polestar, you cannot do that. We have to do our own infotainment. Once we give it to Google, we are lost, right? They dominate our cars and everything. And now, okay, everybody is having it, right? Because it's good and it's easy and it makes sense for the customers, right? Or anybody doesn't want to have Google built in the car, let me know. We don't take it out again.
Yeah, what are some of the other sort of unexpected things that you think car makers are overlooking that Polestar's doing maybe now or in the future to just please customers more?
I think software is a very big topic, right? And I think the Polestar 3 is the first European software-defined vehicle, which is very, very beneficial because we have one core compute, then we can make updates, we can make really the car better. And I think that's an enormous benefit. And I think we're also learning, right? How does this work? How can we get better? But I think that's a big, big topic.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the sort of evolution of electric cars and the migration, I guess, from fossil fuels over to other sources of energy. It's something that's been going on for maybe half a century. People predicting that in 5 years' time we'll have no fossil fuel cars on the road. And I don't know where you think we are in that trajectory. Are we ahead of schedule or behind schedule, do you think, in the move away from fossil fuels?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a real schedule, right? But I think we're definitely going in the right direction, and the future of mobility has to be emission-free, right? Because climate change is very real. I mean, we had the hottest year on records last year. It will be the same this year, while we enjoy, obviously, today. I'm not sure if we enjoy in 10 years' time if it's 35 degrees in May in London, but that will happen. It's unavoidable the way we behave. And that's just a fact, and that's why I'm relatively passionate about what Polestar is doing, because 3 years ago, everybody was talking about climate change. So today at the FT, and I was joking to the guys, I said, you are not allowed to ask the first question on tariffs, because 500% of your questions are tariffs. First, it's pretty boring. I know all the answers in the meantime, because I have rehearsed it with my PR team. And third, do you think that customers get up in the morning and say, let's think about tariffs and which car I'm buying? No, that's nonsense, right? So, but we are very one-sided in terms of topics, right? Okay, sustainability was important, but I'm saying it is important and will be much more important in the future. And even politicians in Europe and the US will realize it. It's real, it's happening, and therefore I'm super proud that we try to contribute to this. And we will deal with the tariffs too.
Okay, good. Well, I won't ask you about tariffs just yet. But
we can do it later.
Okay, good. That'll be the last one. What is electric the final answer in that move towards more sustainable emission-free cars? There's a lot of talk now about hydrogen-fueled cars. Where do you sit on that?
I would say for passenger cars it is, because it's the most efficient one. And when I was Nikola Trucks, we were very focused on hydrogen trucks. And there, in the trucking world, if you have to put a lot of batteries in, it has a disadvantage because it has so much weight. So trucks then lose payload. So I was very optimistic that actually we could do hydrogen trucks. But there are two downsides with hydrogen. First of all, the energy efficiency is relatively low. So you have to put in a lot of stuff to get it out. And then there is hardly any infrastructure. So imagine you have a company and you run 50 trucks and you want to convert now 50 trucks to hydrogen, but you don't know where to basically you get the hydrogen. You're like nervous. I think for electric cars, the charging infrastructure is now so widespread that in some cases it's still a problem, but I think we have made many investments and I think it's energy efficient. So I believe the future of passenger cars is purely electric. I also don't think hydrogen has a chance in passenger cars. For trucks, to be seen.
Yeah. Are there any other emerging technologies that have caught your eye, aside from hydrogen?
No. Okay. and I think it's also, imagine you run a company and you invest. You can't run 5 things in parallel. You need to put your bets on one, and I think the industry and everybody has given the answer, and this is electrification.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk to you a bit about the kind of the process of actually getting your cars to customers. I read an interview with you where you said we will now go from displaying cars to actively selling them, a kind of change in mentality, I think, around the selling process. What made you decide that was important?
For many reasons. So Polestar, when it was set up, I think built a very strong and interesting brand with the right values, right? Sustainability, design, performance, all these things put together. Also, I hope you when you see the cars and also drive, you see like they're really, really good. They are fascinating. But then how do you sell a car? And in the past, the company was of the opinion we display a car in a nice location, maybe somewhere here, and then you can buy it online. And it turned out that very few people actually do that. They're very interested in that. But if you buy or lease a car, you really want to have a more intensive dialogue, like, okay, what is actually the specification? Can I admit that I don't understand all the technology? Can you show me? Can I test drive? What's the offer? Can I bring my wife back the next week? And can we discuss it one more time? And then also really close a deal in the retailer shop then. And I think that was very obvious, and it works extremely successful now while we change it from showing to actively selling, right? We just released our Q1 results, and in the UK we do extremely well. In the first quarter we were 185% up compared to prior year. So those are not small improvements, those are big improvements, and they have a lot to do with like, okay, more retailers and obviously more products, but I think it's working.
Yeah. Is that the single biggest thing you think that you've changed that's made that upswing? Yeah.
And also, interestingly enough, I called it a renaissance of the dealers, or back to basics, while obviously we try to explore many new things, want to have many new innovations, which are good. Sometimes it's also good to go back to where you think actually we should be, right? And I think buying or selling a car is an important process, and I think human touch is important. Just to do it on the internet.
Definitely.
No.
We had a talk yesterday with 2 people who work in the luxury industry, and Nick English, who used to have a watch company, said you can never have your first shop soon enough, was one of his points. He thinks that buying experience online is just never ever going to be quite as emotive as the other ones. And I think probably buying a watch is not dissimilar sometimes to buying a beautiful car.
Yeah, but I think human touch is important. While we live more and more in a digital world, I think it's so important. And by the way, I read the other day the Apple story was also a bit like this. Steve Jobs got a lot of criticism for setting up the Apple stores, and everybody said, like, I think Dell or Hewlett-Packard were very en vogue at that time. He got a lot of criticism for that, and I think he got it right, huh?
Yeah, I think he did. What are the sort of the questions that your salespeople or you hear most from customers who are on the fence about buying a car? What are the kind of still the perceptual barriers that people have with electric vehicles?
I think a couple of topics. Obviously, they're interested in charging, how long it takes, range. But more and more people have experienced it, and then you get peace of mind, and you see like it's actually not that difficult. But in case you haven't done it, you're like, okay, how does this work, right? And I had it myself. I remember the first electric car, and I didn't tell anybody, but I said to my wife, let's test drive it and let's try to charge a little bit, right? And then at the first charging station, a very old lady came and said, you need help, right? And I said, well, why not, right? But so I think people need to experience it, but once they are over that and feel comfortable, obviously there are many technical questions, right? I mean, on the software, how do you do software updates? When do I see that? How do I get informed? And things like that. But yeah, I think we are on the way forward there.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about brand and the importance of branding to cars. Cars, there's some of the most iconic brands in the world are car brands, very emotive brands, I think. How do you go about building something like that from scratch without the 100-year heritage of something like a Ferrari or a Porsche? How can you conjure something emotive with a new brand?
Yeah, I mean, first it's a big decision to set up a new car brand, right? And I think Polestar did exceptionally well because they focused on key things, on a very few things, and then you need to visualize it, obviously, in a product. And the first, after the Polestar 1, but then the first electric car, the Polestar 2, is a very iconic car, and I think focused on key things. And then obviously you need to make it known, right? Show it, that people drive it, cars on the road, marketing. And then you can build it step by step. But and I think it's also important to not change it, right? You don't change brands like, okay, let's now do a new positioning of this and that. Because usually when you do that, you're not successful. But Polestar is only 8 years old. I think the team has done a very good job building up this brand. And now let's keep this consistency and continue like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you take inspiration ever from brands outside of your field? Do you ever get inspiration from, I don't know, the world of big tech or the world of wine or anything else?
Yeah, for sure, and especially our design team. Also, interior is a very important question, right? I mean, what materials are we using, colors, and so on, and they get a lot of inspiration from outside of the industry because otherwise we all live in our own bubble, right? And that's not always the best solution.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. You're also still a kind of a challenger brand, but there are lots of challenger brands even challenging you now that have come up in the last 8 years since Polestar started. How do you plan to keep differentiating yourself from particularly the sort of the wave of imports that are coming now from places like China?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we focus so clearly on the brand, and we are so much perceived, quite rightly, as a Scandinavian brand. It's actually interesting. So when we do business in China, and our ownership structure is that obviously we are a Swedish brand, we are based in Gothenburg, but the majority of our owners are coming from China, so from Geely Group, and from Volvo. So one could think like, okay, people think we are kind of a Chinese company. No, the other way around. So in China, we are totally perceived as a Scandinavian brand, which unfortunately in China at the moment is not an advantage.
Really? What?
No, it's not, because Chinese customers go more and more towards Chinese brands.
Okay.
In terms of customer requirements, technology, also size. So all Western brands are actually in decline in China at the moment, right? And unfortunately, Polestar is not being perceived now as a Chinese brand. It's absolutely as a Scandinavian brand, which on the one hand is very good because it shows the global consistency, but in the specific case of China is not helpful.
No. Okay, interesting. On that kind of geopolitical note, Tesla, of course, is one of the most famous names in electric car brands. Their perception has changed rapidly in the last year due to, I think, the political movements, let's say, of their founder. Is that an advantage for Polestar, do we think, that Tesla perhaps is now a more tricky brand for people to get on board with?
Well, look, we are still a relatively small brand, so we need to find people from other brands or new customers, new buyers, but the majority are driving other cars. So it's obviously incredibly helpful if somebody was driving a Tesla before because they understand EV technology, they understand the charging, all the benefits. So I'm very keen if I can convert a Tesla customer into a Polestar customer, but the same is true for BMW, Audi, and so on. But yeah, I think it's good when people are open-minded in terms of technology and look for different alternatives. And I think that's happening. Like many years ago, EV was really like, okay, just having an EV was a big innovation. But that's not the case anymore. You need to offer more, and we try to do that with our design, with our performance and the sustainability. But yeah, we welcome Tesla customers,
Okay.
no question.
Quite right. Electric cars in general sometimes get sort of used as kind of political playthings, I think. The idea of environmentalism can become a political football, so to speak, in the way that almost anything in the current age seems to be. How do you sort of stay above the politicizing of things like sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, my message to politicians and government is always like, let's keep certainty and also stability, because it's quite funny. When I was, for example, running Opel, I was criticized every day by all politicians. Where are your EV offers? When are they coming? You are not innovating enough. We want more electric cars. Okay, so then we spend billions of euros into electrification. So now many electric offers. Now I work for a company which only offers EVs, and now say, oh, it's a little bit too fast, right? I mean, why don't we go back? So my point to the politicians is, right, I mean, keep the line, hold the line. We do what's right for not only for you, but also for the climate and for people. Because I do believe, like, once people drive electric cars, they realize how much fun it is.
Right, yeah. And do you speak to politicians a lot? Is that something you get to do? Because presumably the more you can be helped with the infrastructure of charging, for one thing, around a town like London, the more useful it is for you. Do you get to chat to them?
Sure, of course. And we try many occasions. I either speak to them directly or at events, but and also in terms of communication, right? So I try to be as vocal as possible, because we have a view on things, right?
Of course. And you mentioned fun there, which I love, because that's something I think that we sort of slightly overlook in driving now. That driving is very useful to get around, but also it can be joyful. I just passed my driving test at the age of 34, 6 months ago. No round of applause for that.
Congratulations.
But I didn't want to cry today. But what I didn't anticipate, I thought, okay, this would just be a useful way for me to move around, is that it's quite a fun thing to do. And now I'll sometimes want to go for a drive at sort of 7 p.m. But where's my question here? How important to you is fun? How important to Polestar is a sense of joy in driving?
Well, it's super important. And I think in general, cars or mobility is still a super, super important topic, because people love it, they love to discuss it and also experience it. And I think it's not just a means of going from A to B, right? And especially for Polestar drivers, with all the performance we offer, with all the elements, the engineering competence, the Polestar DNA, yeah, I mean, we have absolute drivers, and they love it, and that's also what we want to keep, right? Because otherwise you become like a mainstream transportation or mobility company which moves from A to B, and then only the price is interesting and everything else is not. We are exactly the opposite. Quite
right. And what about you? You say you manage 2,500 people. What kind of people do you like to work with? Do you think there's a type of sort of Polestar person, perhaps? And how do you, I guess, work with people? How do you keep the people motivated?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think enthusiasm is important, but we have that everywhere at Polestar, because people come for a reason. And then, of course, is different qualifications, right? So, I mean, on the sales side, I want to have people who are like super high level of energy, talk to customers, go out and go for the next target. I don't know, in the engineering, I want people who are super precise, right? On the financial side, I want to have people who can close the books and things like that, right? So it depends, but overall, of course, enthusiasm is important. And then, obviously, we try to inform people and show them the way, because a lot of companies have been set up a couple of years ago, and several already have disappeared, right? And it's not that the environment is easy, but we want to really show, like, this is where we are. This is the milestone we have achieved. Like, for example, yesterday we reported Q1 figures. It's only 3 months, but it shows, like, okay, where are you after 3 months? And of course, EFT was asking many questions, all the analysts. But also for us internally, it's like, okay, what we are doing is showing results, right? And in terms of our first quarter, our revenue was up 84%, our gross margin is positive, our costs are coming down, the losses were cut in half. And the message internally is like, hey, look, this will work. What we are doing shows tangible results, and let's continue this, right? But I think it's super important in these days to keep the team engaged and motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. The Polestar 7 has been a big part of your recent strategy. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it differs from the other vehicles?
Yeah, sure. So maybe just in terms of our product lineup, because I'm sure not everybody is fully aware. Like, so we have a Polestar 2, we have a 3 and 4, which you see outside, which are larger SUVs. And then this year, in the second half, we bring a Polestar 5, which is a real high-end, high-performance GT. 800-volt bonded aluminum is a super sports car. It actually competes right with the Porsche Taycan, right? Obviously, it's much better than the Porsche Taycan, but you will experience it yourself. So it's a super, super high-end sports car. And by the way, developed in Coventry. UK development here. Very, very important as a halo brand for us to show like this is where we go, this is high-end performance. This is really what the Polestar brand stands for in the best possible way. At the same time, I want that we have a broader appearance in terms of segments which are larger, because not everybody will be able to afford this Polestar 5. It's obviously a little higher in terms of price. And therefore, we go into a compact SUV segment. We'll produce this car in Europe, but have more volume then, right? Because I want to make the brand accessible to more people.
Okay, and that's the 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Wonderful. Well, I want to open out to questions. This gentleman's socks actually are almost the exact same shade of gold as the... I don't know if that's deliberate. That's good. Before we go to questions, I wonder whether you have a kind of a personal motto or a kind of mantra that either guides you as a business person or perhaps as the CEO of Polestar.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, times are not that certain in these days, right? And sometimes you wonder, like, hey, are we doing the right things, and will this work, right? And I think it's so important in terms of leadership, give clarity, but also let's continue to do the right things, even if you don't see everything in the foggy weather, right? I mean, I believe if you do the right things, eventually it will work, right? And I think that's well, I think it's very close to my heart in these days, right? Yeah. I feel we do the right things, but sometimes I also think like, wow, it's quite foggy here, right? Not today.
Not today, thankfully. Wonderful. Right, let's go to the crowd for a couple of questions then. Who'd like to ask something for... Josh Lee at the front here.
Going from a big brand like Opel to a startup, what things did you have to unlearn or completely rethink?
Great question.
Yeah, it actually is. And I think it's, on the one hand, be faster, more entrepreneurial to the point. I think that's what new companies do much, much better. At the same time, you can't just say like, okay, the legacy OEM, they all do everything wrong, because they don't. They have sometimes very clear established processes and they work, but you need to find different ways. And of course, I like to work much more in the entrepreneurial world where you have an impact, right? And you are not just like a director number 15 in the big setup, but you need to find the best of both worlds, because it's not that easy. Even, I'll give you another example. So, when you build up a new company, obviously everybody has this vision like, okay, this is a car and this is what we do, and that's fine. But what is the first question you get from every customer is, where can I service my car? Now, in our case, thankfully, we work with Volvo, and we have 1,100 service locations around the world, which is such a big asset, right? But it sounds like a bit of boring, because you want to talk about the next big car, the next big technology. But before you do all that, you need to make sure that you know where you do your service, right? And there, obviously, the bigger companies have a big benefit. And without Volvo, I could not offer you now 1,100 service locations, and that would be a real big problem. Make sense what I'm trying to illustrate? Yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thanks, Josh. This gentleman here has got a question just 2 rows back.
Thank you. Hi. I have a question in regards to your topic, since you mentioned about like the topic of your talk was the future of mobility. How would you aim for the potential audience? I mean, I would even say non-potential audience, like clients who are completely skeptical buying cars, and what would be your brand positioning or motivation to persuade them you still should have a car? And considering some people, and even including me, I've got very late my driving license here in the UK.
Congrats, welcome.
Welcome to the car. So I was thinking like, why do I need a car? And I just got the driving license just just because I decided why not.
Yeah, there's definitely, I guess there's a sense that there could be a generation to come that doesn't decide to drive. They decide that they'll do other things instead. How do you keep them involved, I guess?
Actually, that's a great point. I wouldn't try to convince everybody to do a driving license and own a car, because I see, like, in the big cities it's really problematic, and you don't need a car, right? I mean, it's probably sometimes even a burden, right, to park it and so on, right? But at the same time, I sense there is a need for people to drive, and also who want to drive. But I wouldn't try to convince now everybody. I think it depends, and you made your choice, right? And other people make different choices. So I don't think, like, okay, everybody needs to drive. That I don't think is the way to go. But to offer, okay, what makes it fascinating, and then once you can drive, then that it is a real pleasure to drive, in this case, a Polestar.
Excellent. Thanks for the question. There's two, yes. We'll start with this lady, and then the man with the perfect color socks.
Thank you. My question is more related to brand building and marketing. As an innovative brand, you started with the innovators, the early adopters, but what's your advice in crossing the chasm and going from the early adopters into the early and big majority?
Yeah, also a very good point, because I think when you build up a brand, or some of the things in automotive in general, which I've forgotten, is like, okay, what are really your key target customers, right? So in many cases, people build cars actually for themselves, right? Because we're all car guys, and then we go to design, and then we do a car, and we say, we love it. Okay, sales, you need to sell it now, right? And obviously that's wrong. So I think clear focus on your key customers, target groups is important. And of course, with electrification now at the beginning, yeah, you had early adopters, right? But that has passed, right? So now they're in different stages. And I think this targeting, this right approach is of highest importance. And then it comes back to the brand. What do you stand for, and what offers you have there, right?
Excellent. Wonderful.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask, has Polestar ever thought about not selling cars? And I don't mean to be facetious, but rather considering what is going to happen to the car at the end of its life, would they just have different use cases for the life over its period of time? So whether it be a lease for the first 3 years, and then a second-hand lease, and so on and so forth, where you can repurpose the battery once it's not usable to push a car forward, and can be used for stationary energy storage to power this building that we sit in now. Yeah, is that something that you've thought about?
That's a very interesting question.
And we do think about this in particular with regard to the battery, because the battery will have a long life, right? So what do you do? I mean, first, okay, you sell the car. Now what we do for, like, used cars, we do battery certification, like health certification, like this is the status of the battery, so that people know, like, okay, for the next cycle, I have a good battery. But then eventually this will come to an end, and I don't know, after 15 years the car is not there, and then we do think a lot about, okay, what are we doing with the battery there? As a storage for energy, how could we do that? And I think that's also the benefit of electrification and batteries, because there is a life afterwards. Do we have all the answers for that today? The answer is also not yet.
Excellent. Very good question. I wanted to ask you about tariffs. No, I'm joking.
Now is the time, right?
No, I think let's go through without talking about Donald Trump and tariffs. It's been such a fascinating and enlightening and actually super positive talk as well. So I want to thank you all for coming. And especially thank you, Michael, for being so open and for chatting to us today. It's made it really, really fascinating. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.